Furina is the Archon of all time, except she's not really an Archon. But that doesn't matter that much, because we as a community are going to have drama over if Furina is good or not, and I've been following this drama very closely. As a matter of fact, I predicted this was gonna happen in one of my pre-leak analysis videos, but back then I was shit on by a lot of Genshin Impact community members for telling me that I was wrong, and what I thought was gonna happen with Furina was not gonna happen, and that I needed to reread her kit. However, much like Dea, when I read her kit and I saw there were problems, I made a video talking about the problems, and once again, I was right. That's not a boast, nor is that a flex. Reading numbers and letters on a screen and figuring out that it means XYZ doesn't necessarily mean anything. But unfortunately, a lot of people didn't read the kit before they pulled for her, and now people are immensely disappointed. And now we have a drama. Two sides of the community arguing whether or not a character is valuable or not, and I'm here to tell you both sides, and then I will give you my opinion on it. So first, let's go over the casual player side. These were originally sparked by players that don't play the game that often. Most notably, Imtash, a very big Genshin YouTuber, made a video where he talks about Furina and why he thinks she's not really that valuable for his account. And a lot of people have been giving Imtash a lot of shit because, oh, well, you just playing her wrong, you know, XYZ, there's no such thing as a bad character, only a bad player, is what it is. Here's the thing though, Furina is very popular. A lot of people really like the character, so if you say something bad about her, a ton of people are going to bootlick and meat ride the character because they see no flaws with their character, when at the end of the day, flaws can exist. Primary example of this is Yola fans. Even bigger meta channels like 1010 and the like have discussed the many issues that Yola has as a character, but at the end of the day, if they point out these flaws, the Yola community is going to come out them and lampoon them, but hey, it is what it is. At the end of the day, flaws can exist, and Furina has a ton of flaws. And I unfortunately say that as a Furina main. I am working on C6ing my Furina as it currently stands, and I too can see the flaws in Furina's C0 kit. But Imtash, as an individual, should not be being harassed because he made an opinion on the character, because a lot of us need to sit back and realize that Imtash is not being negative. No, he can't be, because he's not biased one way or another. If anything, he was biased to be more positive because he liked Furina beforehand. As for what his opinion was, essentially Imtash claims that Furina in and of itself is not a very good buffer. Furina's kit, for those of you that don't know, she casts a bunch of little Pokemon that'll deal damage for her, and then upon casting her elemental burst, she will begin to stack fanfare once you lose a percent of HP or gain a percent of HP. For every percent gained or lost, you will gain 1 stack of fanfare, eventually capping out at 300 stacks. The more stacks you have, the more damage you get, and depending on the talent level of her burst, the stacks you get per fanfare will change in value. Okay, so what is the problem? The problem is Furina's entire kit is to be an off-field hydro applicator and buffer for the team. However, she fails significantly at being a proper buffer, as there are many other options that buff the team that do the job better, like Kazuha. Why does she fail as a buffer? Well, it's very simple. It's very hard to gain and lose HP and any significant value with Furina on the team at C0, unless you play her with very specific characters. Characters like Jean, Chi-Chi, Barbara, Noelle, Kuki Shinobu, Nouvellette, the like, who can rapidly change or grow the HP of their teammates around them, work best with Furina, because at the end of the day, these are the only few characters that currently exist that can stack fanfare and gain fanfare by losing and rapidly changing your HP efficiently. Other than that, your options are very slim, and if you're not stacking fanfare efficiently, there's no real reason to use Furina outside of the fact that you like her. That's not to say she's bad at C0, because she still functions well with Hyper Blue Alhaitham, Double Hydra Hu Tao, and Nouvellette team comps, which as it turns out are three of my favorite teams and some of the best teams in the game right now, but it doesn't really matter when your options outside of that are very limited. And I know a lot of people who really like Furina don't want to hear that, but man, you gotta sit here and accept the truth. The writing was on the wall. It was so clear that I even said this was gonna happen in one of my earlier videos where I went over it, which I will play now. First things first, it is very hard to collect fanfare on a team that's not designed around it. Let me explain. At the time of recording, there are not very many characters that drastically alter their HP threshold. The only two that I can think of off the top of my head are Hu Tao and Nouvellette, and that is it. This basically means that if you can't actively change the amount of HP that your current team has, it's going to be very hard to make use of Furina's elemental burst. Stacking fanfare is going to be very difficult. If you do have Nouvellette or Hu Tao on a team, yeah, you're going to get the first 100, maybe 200 pretty easily, but after that, you are going to have a very hard time. On top of that, the burst only lasts for 18 seconds, so if you do manage to stack a lot of fanfare, it's going to be very hard to maintain that damage for any significant period of time. So I have a very hard time thinking of ways to make Furina useful on most current teams. I'm sure this as an issue will become less apparent as more Fontanian characters come out, but as of the time of recording, this is a pretty big downside. So it's no real surprise now that Furina's out and she is playable that this problem was idealized. Here's the real issue though. It is much worse in practice than it is on paper, and what doesn't help is that a lot of people are going into Furina with very high expectations because unfortunately, meta YouTubers have a very bad habit of fanning up a character to the point where everybody expects them to be God, and then they get them, and then they're not, which is a problem I talked about a long time ago in a very old video, but I'm not gonna bring it up because it's old and my voice was shit. But essentially what I said was that a lot of meta YouTubers and big how to build this character YouTubers really go out of their way to say that every character that comes out is really good and they're overpowered, and they're really not. You know, we saw this happen with Dea, where a lot of big YouTubers were saying that, oh, Dea's good, and people get their hands on her and they're like, oh shit, she performs like ass. And this happens in smaller aspects with a lot of 4-star characters, but again, never really happens there because there aren't huge backlashes, because as it turns out, less people give a shit about the 4 stars, you know? The lower the character rarity, the lower the opinion people have. Unfortunately, Furina didn't have that luxury, and what really doesn't help the drama is the fact that Furina herself is incredibly, just absolutely astronomically overpowered if you get her constellations. Let me put it like this for those of you that are behind the loop. Furina at C0 is very niche, a luxury character in its purest form, only functions on a few teams, and those teams that she performs on, she performs good on them. However, if you have her C2, she becomes one of the best characters in the game. Universal 72% damage increase on every single team. On top of that, buffing herself immensely for her turret attacks. Because since all of her damage and her healing scales mostly off of her HP, and crit damage and the like, you are literally giving yourself an 140% HP increase, which is 3 HP main stat artifacts for the grand total of free. It is one of the nastiest constellations I have seen in Genshin ever. Matter of fact, I'm gonna take that back. It is the nastiest. It is easily, without a shadow of a doubt, the best constellation in Genshin Impact. Name one other constellation that increases your whole team's damage by 72%, while also increasing her own damage by about double. The only thing that's keeping this from being game-shatteringly overpowered is the fact it doesn't buff elemental reactions, but characters like Hu Tao and Alhaitham and drivers like Cyno that do a bunch of damage just became so much better if you have Furina C2. And unfortunately, because it's so good, there's a discussion that sparked of whether or not this should be allowed or not. Now, I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring because once again, I talked about this before. I talk about a lot of things on this channel. When Wriothesley came out, I made a video, or tried to make a video, and eventually just became a live stream, where I talked about why I thought Wriothesley C1 sets a horrible precedent. Because unlike other people who were comparing Hu Tao's C1 to Wriothesley C1, were like, it's such a huge damage increase. The difference is between Hu Tao and Wriothesley is Hu Tao's damage increase comes off of a quality of life increase, because Hu Tao at C0 is still incredibly strong. Wriothesley, on the other hand, his kit does not function unless you have his C1, and because of that, his damage is immensely lower. They essentially tore apart the character and plucked him and put his usefulness behind a con. This is somewhere along the same ballpark, but to a completely different degree, because while Wriothesley at C0 is kind of meh, and his C1 is a power increase but still kind of meh, Furina at C0 still performs her job well, and she still is best in slot on some teams, but with her C2, she becomes the most overpowered godlike thing in existence. So, where do you draw the line? One way or another, what ended up coming out of this is now both sides are clashing with one another, arguing over if they think Furina is good and if they think Furina is bad. Which she's not. She performs her role well, and she is useful in some of the stronger teams in the game, but that doesn't really matter because a lot of people see an Archon and they're like, oh, I want Archon level of strength, when typically that's just not going to happen, because there is no Archon level of strength. If you even look back on it, most Archons aren't even that good. You know, Venti is a nuke you're not allowed to use, Zhongli is universal and shield capability, and, you know, Red Shred, whoop-de-doo. Raiden is an energy recharge battery that only does good damage at C2, and before then, she's very easily replaceable with anybody else. Nahida is the only really case I can think of, but even then she's not universal because she's locked into Dendro, so why is it all of a sudden a problem when Furina comes out and she's locked into, I don't know, Fontaine characters? Like, whoop-de-doo, even though a lot of her best slot teammates aren't from Fontaine. On top of that, I feel like a lot of you aren't thinking about the real-life scenario that we're currently living in which case that a lot of characters that'll come out later in Fontaine are going to be her best in slot teammates. I can't say much because it'll be, you know, against my code, but currently as it stands, Furina's looking like a best in slot pick for Navia. Alright, same thing can be said for Arlentino. Can't say much. Arlentino is going to be a pyro damage character who comes from Fontaine, so is it really that much of a stretch to think she's gonna use some HP mechanic? I don't know. And not only that, a lot of the best DPS options in the game right now currently use HP drain in some way or another, whether it be Alhaitham Hyperbloom's Kuki team, or I don't know, Hu Tao herself draining half her HP. It's not like there aren't options, it's just people are disappointed that their character that they like isn't universal, and that's fine, but making videos talking about how she's useless and garbage and doesn't do anything, you're wrong, straight up. She's not. She's just a luxury character that has specific roles, and that's what she does. Now, if you have the luxury to get her C2, then she is going to absolutely break the spine of every single enemy in the game over your kneecap, but until you get that, you're just gonna have to suffer with what you have. I know it sucks right now, but again, a lot like Nahida, and a lot like the other Archons before her, she will only get better as more time comes on and more characters that match with her synergy come out. It is not game over for Furina. Most characters in this game only get better as time goes on, and she's not even that bad now. That all being said, I would love to hear your opinions on the matter, because I know a lot of people have their own opinions. Those of you that finished the video, if you like the video, like. If you dislike it, dislike it. If you really like me, go and subscribe. I am going to go play more with my C2 Furina. I'll see you all in the next video. Stay safe, and peace.